Robert Kiyosaki, the best-selling author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is wrong about a whole lot of things, including debt, how to invest, the global economy, and a ton of other things. However, he's not wrong about everything. So what are some of the top lessons you can learn from Robert Kiyosaki, and which ones should we apply in this day and age? Let's go ahead and break it down. Okay, so we did an entire video about all the places where Robert Kiyosaki is wrong. You should definitely check that one out. But again, not everybody is 100% good or 100% bad. There are some good things that people can say from time to time. And Robert Kiyosaki, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, was one of the pioneers of personal finance. So today, what are some of those good things? I pulled out three, maybe four. Perhaps one of these things you can kind of combine. The first one, which I think he is most known for, is that you should know the difference between assets and liabilities. Okay, that is a very basic tenet now because of the work that he did and the education that he put out there. Education that is quite controversial if you ask me. However, what is an asset? His definition and most people's definition, these are things that put money into your pocket, and then liabilities are things that take money out of your pocket. Think of stocks as an asset, something that can grow in value, it can pay you dividends, and something like a liability could be a used car. Right? It just takes money out of your pocket. It could be debt that you're taking on for a vacation that you took a year ago. Vacation was great, helped you recharge, but you're still paying for that, right? That is a liability. Credit card debt in general is a liability. You want to increase your assets as much as possible and avoid and reduce a lot of those liabilities. This is where we come to that net worth equation. When we say someone is worth X amount or this person is a millionaire, that is because their assets minus their liabilities equals $1 million. Okay, so that is something that you should absolutely know. I would argue one of the first things you should know when you're understanding money is the difference between the assets and the liabilities, because again, you got to collect the assets. You want to grow the assets and shrink the debt, shrink the liabilities. Now, part of this, which you could argue is number two, or you could say kind of falls somewhere in between, so this could be two or it could be a part of one as well, is knowing the difference between good debt and bad debt. Now, I'm saying this a lot with an asterisk here because recently, the last video that we did about him, he talked about how he was more than $1 billion in debt, he wasn't going to pay the debt back, and if the bank collapses, then fine. That is not a good practice, okay? It's not something that I endorse, taking out that much debt and then not caring whether the bank goes bankrupt because you go bankrupt. He also has multiple bankruptcies, okay? So, okay, I'm putting all the stuff out there, putting all the facts out there, but it is true that there is a difference between good debt and bad debt. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we have done an entire video on that, but the basics is this. A good debt is something that you are taking out a loan for a reasonable interest rate, and it is going to provide something more valuable than what you paid for. For example, if I take out a $30,000 student loan for an engineering degree, the engineering degree is going to pay me $110,000 every year out of school. Okay, now these are example numbers here, but if I'm going to get paid $110,000, I only paid $30,000 for it, that's still a liability. That is still a debt. But 110 is greater than 30. Now, if I were to reverse that and say, hey, I'm going to take out $65,000 in a loan and I'm going to get a degree in education, and this education degree is only going to pay me $20,000, that's an opposite equation, and that's not something that would be the best financial move per se. Do we need teachers? Yes, I was a teacher, right? But you have to pay attention. What am I paying for this thing, and then what is the value that I'm getting out of it and out from it? Same thing with credit card debt. I can go and buy pizza for the kids and do all this stuff on my credit card, but as that interest is racking up, is the value still there, right? Is the value still there? Was it really worth $800 in interest and fees that I was paying on the credit card for 6 months for one pizza party or one thing one outfit or something that I wanted for that particular day? That's usually a pretty bad debt. So you want to make sure that you are only taking out debt for things that are going to be assets or things that produce cash flow. Cash flow meaning it's something that's going to pay you on a consistent basis. Now, when it comes to how he looks at good debt and bad debt, how he interprets it today versus how he did 20 or 30 years ago, that's up to y'all. That's up to him. I'm not the biggest fan on how he starts to look at those things. I also do think that good debt and bad debt can be subjective as well, which I don't necessarily agree with. But the way that I define it, is the thing that you are buying going to be worth, or is it going to make you more money at the end of the day? That is going to be the biggest answer to it. And sometimes you're not going to know that up front. There are plenty of people who use a good debt, bad debt analysis or viewpoint when it comes to college. In some cases, it absolutely works. In some cases, you might not know until after the fact, especially for people who tend to go to grad school and everything else. So good debt, bad debt, it is something that you should start to incorporate, and it's something that you should at least be aware of. We've got 2 more here on the list. As we get to those, don't forget to sign up for my free workshop on how you can create your first 6-figure investing plan. I'll show you how to invest, what are some options you might want to invest in, and how you can do that on any budget. All right, next one here is focus on assets that produce cash flow. Now, we talked about assets. We know what assets are. However, he puts a very big emphasis on cash flow. These are things that are going to pay you, hopefully now, and pay you on a consistent basis. So, an example, I own my home. It is an asset. However, it is not necessarily something that's producing cash flow. My house ain't made me no money at all. Now, I can argue that it's taking money, right? I had to, get the trees fixed, I had to do all this kind of stuff, get the garage fixed. It's taking money, but it's not something that's paying me every single month. A rental property, however, is something that is going to bring in money every single month. If I were to buy, let's say, a food truck or something like that, that is an asset that could bring in cash flow every single month. What he tries to do and tries to teach is, if you buy enough assets and they pay you cash flow, that cash flow can pay off the debt or pay for itself, right? If I have to take out a loan to pay for a food truck makes enough money, you just kind of cycle that money right back in the food truck until it pays for itself, and now it's paid off. And that money can go and buy your vacation. That money can go and buy, whatever the luxuries and the things that you should and want to enjoy. I can say the exact same thing about the stock market. I can say the exact same thing about dividend stocks. Dividend stocks are still a part of the stock market. You guys get the point. But I can say, look, I'm going to go ahead and put my money in a great dividend stock. Once those dividends pay out, I'm going to take some and buy more assets. Take that and buy a rental property perhaps. Or take that and go on a vacation, right? It's not, my hard-earned 9-to-5 money. It is my assets and that cash flow that is going to help me to pay for X, Y, and Z. If you ask me, this is my favorite concept from Robert Kiyosaki, something that I learned a very, very long time ago before I kind of learned all the other stuff that I wish I probably shouldn't have learned from Robert Kiyosaki or don't wish to know about Robert Kiyosaki. But it is a very good classic concept of having assets and making sure that they are paying some sort of cash flow. Now, when it comes to the stock market, does every single stock need to have cash flow for you? Does every single stock need to pay a dividend? It does not have to happen. Okay, it is not a requirement. There are several stocks, and we talk about this all the time, that just do quite well without paying a dividend, and you can just sell portions of those. However, what he focuses on primarily are the ones, not necessarily stocks per se, but are the things that just pay a flat out cash flow, which is why he tends to love real estate and have an affinity for real estate, which does have its disadvantages. We can talk about those at a later point in time. The next thing, and I think nobody is going to argue about this one, is learning personal finance, taking the time to sit down and learn and study personal finance, and teaching to your kids, teaching to the next generation, and teaching to the people around you. I 100% agree here for obvious reasons. You guys have already seen the videos that I've done about what my kids are currently investing in and how well those stocks are doing. The older they get, the more conversations that we are going to have. I will tell you this as a parent, though, that I did not know. My son is 6, so 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, I didn't know this. It's not as easy as what you think before you have kids, especially at this age, right? As they get older, perhaps this is going to get easier for me. But, teaching a kid who is just learning the concept of numbers and math is not easy, teaching them, about money and the stock market and everything else at this phase. I assume things will get easier. Again, I was a teacher myself, so I know what it's going to be like, around 6th, 7th, 8th grade when I was teaching. So yeah, things conceptually will get a lot easier. But the thing is, it is important to have those conversations. It is important to start that early, because they should inherit some portion of wealth. If nothing else, they should inherit the wealth of information that you do learn and avoid some of the mistakes that you may have made. Also, the people around you. I don't want to be the richest person in my circle. Okay. I want us all to win together, and I don't want to be the richest one in the room because I want to learn from everybody else. I want to also pull up the group too. And when you have people in those circles, you can also gain from their network and everything else. So teach the people around you, share books, share resources, share this video, share this channel, and everything in between with the people in your circle, and do so for your kids. I know people in the comments that say, hey, look, my 14-year-old watches your channel. My 14-year-old also invested in this. Can they invest on Cash App? How do I open an account for X, Y, and Z on Fidelity because they're 16 or 17 trying to figure it out? That is how wealth happens. It is how generational wealth happens. And most importantly is how wealth stays in your family, because when you learn and the person next to you learns and 5 or 6 people next to them start to learn, you can combine that knowledge and you can pool your resources together and learn a whole lot faster and a whole lot better than someone making all the mistakes on their own and kind of going through stuff just blindly. So you absolutely don't want to do that by yourself. Now, if you want to also know what Robert Kiyosaki was wrong about and the things you should absolutely avoid, now that you know the things you should absolutely absorb, then you want to check out this video right here.